He stood alone against 12 German bombers. The outcome became legendary. It sounds like a tale too extraordinary to be real. A single Allied fighter pilot, thousands of feet above war-torn Europe, flying straight into the path of 12 approaching Luftwaffe bombers. Each one heavily armed, heavily escorted, and deadly. June 20th, 1944. The skies over northern France were thick with smoke, radio chatter, and the distant echoes of artillery from the ground below. The Allies had landed in Normandy only 2 weeks earlier. The invasion was underway. The German Luftwaffe was desperate to strike back, desperate for any blow that could stem the tide. And on this day, one man found himself alone in the sky. A man whose name would echo quietly in squadron logs. A man whose actions would be whispered about in briefing tents. A man who would later say only 4 words about what happened that day. I did my duty. But what unfolded in those 20 minutes would go far beyond duty. It would become a legend. This is the forgotten story of Flight Lieutenant Thomas Calder, and the day he stood alone against 12 German bombers and won. To understand why this moment mattered, we must rewind to the days immediately after D-Day, June 6, 1944. The Allies had carved out a fragile foothold on the beaches of Normandy. The German 7th Army was scrambling to counterattack, while Luftwaffe 3, the Luftwaffe's air command in France, was stretched thin, exhausted, and rapidly losing aircraft. But they were far from finished. The Luftwaffe's desperation strategy. German commanders knew they couldn't match Allied air power in open skies. The RAF and USAF controlled the air almost entirely. So instead, the Luftwaffe turned to targeted strikes. Bomb Allied beachheads, hit ammunition depots, destroy bridges, and knock out troop concentrations. Try to slow the Allied advance to a crawl. One German bomber group in particular, Kampfgeschwader 76, flying Ju-88s, was tasked with launching fast, low-altitude bombing runs at dawn and dusk. Their targets on June 20th, Allied supply columns near Bayeux and a forward command post near Caen. To reach those targets, however, they had to pass through the patrol zone of No. 245 Squadron RAF, flying Hawker Typhoon Mk.IB ground attack fighters. Enter Flight Lieutenant Thomas Calder. Calder was Scottish, born in Aberdeen, raised in the cold winds that swept across the North Sea. He joined the RAF in 1941, flew combat missions over Dieppe in 1942, survived flak bursts over the Channel, and took part in the softening strikes before D-Day. But he had never faced what he would face this day. At 28 years old, he was already a seasoned pilot.
117 combats sortis.
4 confirmed air kills. Dozens of ground attack missions. A distinguished flying cross recommendation pending. His aircraft, Hawker Typhoon Mk.IB, armed with 4 20mm Hispano cannons, one of the most brutally effective low-altitude fighters of the war. But the Typhoon had one major weakness. It was less effective at high altitude, making it a risky match against bombers flying above 10,000 feet. No. 245 Squadron situation on the morning of June 20th. The war diary described the conditions simply: exhausted but determined. Pilots were flying up to 4 sorties per day. A ground crews worked through the night repairing battle-worn Typhoons. Ammunition stocks were running low. Weather conditions were rough. Fog and cloud banks disrupted radar readings. At 0510 hours, radar stations picked up a formation of incoming aircraft originating from the Chartres region. The estimated number, 12 to 14 bogies, possibly more. Likely bombers. Likely escorted. No. 245 Squadron scrambled immediately, but mechanical failures struck at the worst possible time. 2 Typhoons misfired on startup. A 1 developed a coolant leak. A 1 had faulty landing gear. Another cracked its canopy latch. Within minutes, only 1 aircraft had successfully taken off. Thomas Calder. Little did he know, he would be the only one to intercept the enemy in time. The stage was set. The Luftwaffe bombers were minutes away from striking Allied positions. And one man, one pilot, was climbing alone into the sky to meet them. At 0604 hours, Flight Lieutenant Thomas Calder pushed the throttle of his Typhoon Mk.IB forward until the engine roared with full power. The Napier Sabre engine, a 24-cylinder beast, growled beneath the cockpit, sending vibrations through the airframe as he climbed toward the cloud layer. He scanned the sky. Nothing but gray mist and streaks of morning light. The radio crackled with static. Control to Blue Leader. Be advised. Bogies now at Angels 10. Speed estimated 220 knots. Possible Ju 88s. No friendlies in your vicinity. Calder acknowledged with a short, steady reply. Blue Leader copying. But inside, his pulse was rising. He knew what no friendlies meant. He was alone. Below him, the Normandy coastline stretched like a scar across northern France. Columns of smoke rising from artillery duels, bright flashes erupting near Cannes, and the distant curve of Omaha Beach still littered with debris from the D-Day landings. Every inch of ground had been paid for in blood, and now a German bomber group was coming to take more. Calder climbed through 8,000 feet, then 9,000. His oxygen mask hissed softly. The Typhoon's wings shuddered in the cold, thin air. At 10,500 feet, he broke through the cloud layer. The world turned white and silent, a thick bank of rolling clouds beneath him and clear blue miles above. This was where the Luftwaffe liked to fly. This was where they were most dangerous. And this was where he would meet them. At 0610 hours, Calder level out at 12,000 feet. His cockpit canopy glinted in the early sunlight. He wiped condensation from the inside glass with his glove. Nothing. He checked his watch, then his fuel gauge. He had enough fuel for roughly 40 minutes, less if he fought at full throttle. He turned east, toward the predicted approach route of Kampfgeschwader 76. Then he saw it, a faint dark smear on the distant horizon. He squinted. It wasn't smoke. It wasn't cloud. It was moving slowly, deliberately, like a massive airborne shadow. He steadied his breathing. As he flew closer, the shapes sharpened. Wings, fuselages, twin tailplanes. Then sunlight flashed off glass and metal. The Luftwaffe had arrived. Calder whispered under his breath. Ju 88 is 12 of them. He counted again. 10. No. 11. There 12. 12 Junkers Ju 88A4 bombers, flying in a tightly controlled V formation. Dead ahead. Each bomber bristled with MG-81 machine guns, nose turret, dorsal turret, a ventral gondola, side windows. Every approach risked deadly crossfire. And then he saw something far worse. 3 Bf-109 G6 fighters, Messerschmitt escorts, flying slightly above and behind the formation. They were the real threat. Fast, agile, letal. The RAF had learned early in the war. You do not attack bombers while the escorts are intact. UD. But Calder had no choice. He was outnumbered 15-1. He tapped the top of his gun sight with a gloved finger. It flickered to life, bright, sharp amber light. He tightened his oxygen mask. Right then, he whispered, let's begin. Suddenly, his radio hissed violently with static. Blue Leader, control. Be advised, multiple signals. Lost track, repeat, lost track, unable vector. The transmission vanished. Radar had lost him. He was now fully alone in every sense of the word. He looked down. The cloud layer beneath him was thick and blinding white. If he dove into it, he'd lose sight of the Germans. If he stayed above it, he remained exposed to the escorts. He was hanging between life and death. He tightened his grip around the control stick. The Luftwaffe formation continued lumbering toward Allied lines. If they reached the beaches, the casualties would be catastrophic. There was no more time for caution. Calder angled his Typhoon slightly upward for speed advantage, then banked right in a slow, deliberate arc to position himself behind the German formation. He checked his ammunition.
140 rounds per cannon.
About 8 seconds of total firing time. That was all he had to destroy as many bombers as possible. He whispered, 2 passes, maybe 3, then I'm done. His heartbeat thudded against his headset. At 0614 hours, Calder made his decision. The decision that would make him a legend. He lifted the safety latch on his weapon controls. A small red light glowed on the panel. Armed. Ahead of him, the 12 Ju-88s flew with chilling precision. Black crosses on their wings, bomb loads slung beneath their bellies, engines rumbling like distant thunder. The 3 Bf-109 escorts held position above them, silent, watchful predators. Calder angled himself toward the rear left bomber, the last in the formation. He took one deep breath, another. Then he whispered to himself, "For them down there, for all of them." He pushed the throttle until the Typhoon screamed. The aircraft surged forward. The distance closed rapidly. 800 meters, 600, 400. Then the bombers opened fire. Green tracers slashed past his canopy. The dorsal gunners had spotted him. Calder didn't flinch. He lined up his gun sight. The amber dot rested on the Ju-88's left engine. He placed his thumb over the firing button. The Germans kept firing. Tracers whipped past him like burning comets. This was suicide. Any sane pilot would break off. But Calder stayed on target. He pressed the trigger, and the world exploded into thunder.